Hello everyone, and welcome back to Aero League Racing Tier 1. My name is Aman, and you all join me today for the Canadian Grand Prix. Only a few more minutes now until we get underway, so while we have the chance, why not take a look at the standings very quickly. So as of right now, Mitchell leads the championship with 130 points, with BR4 right behind him in P2 with 128. In P3, we have Joe Royal with 98 points, and Big Bambino and Stell following in P4 and P5 with 92 and 80 points respectively. The rest of the top 10 would be Typos, Elite, Jaguar, Ella, and Adam. Looking at the constructors' standings, Williams leads the top of the table with 135 points, but Ferrari is very close behind them with 134 in P2. We have Red Bull in P3 with 133. So top one, so P1, P2, P3 basically separated by 3 or 2 points essentially. In P4 we have Aston Martin with 98 points, and then Mercedes in P5 with 94, and the rest of the top 10 we have McLaren, Haas, AlphaTauri, Alpine, and Alfa Romeo respectively. So then, ladies and gentlemen, I think only a little while longer until we get started. Unfortunately, we barely just made it up into the top. Barely made it 10 drivers today, as a lot of drivers are unfortunately not available. What's good, Said? Great to see you as always. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate we have a smaller grid today, but I think we should still be in store for some exciting racing. So until we get started, get yourself comfortable, maybe get yourself something nice to eat or drink, grab a loved one, and we should be getting started very, very soon. There's only 11 drivers in Tier 4. I Tier 1 and Tier 4 should have had a mixed race. There's nobody you love? Yes, other than Tier 1's commentator, of course. A bit unfortunate that we have a very small grid. I really do think that if there was only a few drivers from Tier 1 racing today, maybe just mix it in with Tier 4 and just see what happens. I mean, we're nearing now, but with how close the championship battle is, I'm sure your championship runners would not be happy about that. Speaking of championship runners, I do have to make sure of something. So, Mitchell is obviously leading the championships at the moment with 130 points, but BR4 is not in the lobby. Is BR4 racing today? Interesting. It says I don't know if he is actually. Wait. I don't think he is. So this is going to be a massive hit on BR4's championship run, unfortunately. Attendance is shambolic in both tiers. Yeah, that usually tends to happen near the end of the season as drivers slowly get tired out, especially considering this game isn't exactly the greatest game on the planet, or not the best edition of F1 that's been released. Yeah, I'm not surprised a lot of people are done. Yes, Alupalu and Italiano being the super subs for Tier 1. Of course, greatly appreciate their presence here and them them taking the time out to fill in the empty slots that we have available. Oh, but yeah, this will be a massive hit on BR4's championship run, seeing as how Mitchell's leading the championship right now, and if he goes on to win this race, then well, with only a handful of more races to go, or very few of them, it'll be interesting to see if BR4 can maybe bring the fight right back to him, but or will this be Mitchell's three-peat that we've oh so longly awaited? Right, time to get the details all set up. As is tradition, I'll turn on telemetry and turn it back off because I'm pretty sure I've done that every single time on every time on whenever I've been commentating, but regardless. Right then, qualifying session at Canada now underway. A tricky track, very easy to lose the cars, and as we've seen, there's a lot of fast chicanes where if you go over the curves a bit too much, you may spin out. But it'll be interesting to see. But also a lot of straight line speed required on this track because of the long straights. And we have some activity at the Ferrari garage, and it's at the McLaren garage, and it is Adam who looks to be the first driver out on track. We can see Ishtar and Mitchell both also opting to come out for their qualifying runs as well. But we will be riding on board with Adam as he runs us through hopefully the first timed run here at Canada, assuming that he obviously does not invalidate his lap. And this will give us a good chance to take a look at what the track layout is like. We can also see, I think Mitchell is out on the medium tire compound, for some reason. Maybe just trying to set some rubber down so he can have a faster lap later on. And that was a terrible camera angle as we just stared at the barriers for a few minutes. But yeah, it's very close walls next to the track here, so even the slightest mistake will send you right into them. It's going to be very easy to DNF on this circuit, but hopefully with a few drivers out, with only 11 drivers out on the grid today, we may be looking at a few less collisions. But then again, it's so easy to lose the car on a track like this that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few incidents here and there and a few safety cars that do inevitably decide to come out. Regardless, spectating Adam as he approaches the fastest of what the final chicane right next to the wall of champions, as it's very easy to come into collision there and completely break off your front wheel. And as he comes across the line, he has an invalidated lap. So that is not going to be a timed run from Adam as of yet. We'll switch our attention towards Ishtar and Mitchell, who are the second two cars, the second and third drivers who entered out on track. So we'll spectate them. Ishtar now coming through sector 1. Obviously, we saw Adam, who unfortunately invalidated his lap time. We have a yellow flag in sector 1, and that is the Mercedes of Stel, who happily gets out of the way. Very close camera angles over here next to the walls. We can see there's the cars whizzing by. Approaching now, coming through sector 2 now, the first DRS zone of this track. There are 3 DRS zones. One's on the pit straight, and the other's in sector 2 and 3. Mr. May maybe opting to give his teammate a bit of the slipstream here so he can pull away that championship, as there's only a few more races left to go. And we saw Mitchell there miss the apex off the corner very slightly, but he is also out on the medium tires for some reason. So we'll see what kind of laps he can maybe set. Now Ishtar coming towards the wall of champions. How is he going to do? Manages to get through the final corner, does not activate his DRS coming through the final DRS zone, sets a 112.0. Meanwhile, Mitchell now comes across the line and sets a 111.0 on the mediums. Looking down the grid, let's take a look at who, as we right on board with Alu, who unfortunately spins out, and Bambino on the soft tire compounds, only 0.3 faster, manages to set provisional pole time with a 110.7. As we see the Williams of Bambino nearly coming out in front of the Mercedes there. Luckily, they avoided a collision. As I believe, yes, it was the Mercedes of Ella. Alupalu, of course, obviously had his issues. Meanwhile, Jaguar and Pyro pushed themselves up into P3 and P4 respectively with a 111.3 and 111.7. Adam, also on a run of his own, has set a purple sector 2, and with DRS wide open, it seems to be he's on a flyer. Is on the softs. So will we be looking at a provisional pole position? And no, unfortunately not. Adam unfortunately invalidates his lap coming over the corner. It sets a 110.3, which would have been good enough for provisional pole, but unfortunately because of that invalidation, that is going to cost him dearly. Ella has also invalidated his lap time, and Italiano, squarely on the exit there. Seems to be on a decent run of his own, setting a purple sector 2. Catches the apex very nicely, and now heading down sector 3. Just a full flat out zone until the final chicane with DRS. So now then, what will Rigo set for himself coming through the final chicane? He does unfortunately invalidate his lap. So all the drivers really heavily struggling on that final chicane, as it's so difficult to get right, especially at the breakneck speeds you're going typically on those laps. Ella does not seem to be, or he may actually be on a run out of his own. He's gotten a bit out of shape there. Still also on a run of his own. Rigo unfortunately had his lap DNF, invalidated. So let us ride on board with Stel at the moment. Currently P10 without a lap set. Beautiful helmet design on his yeah, just a beautiful helmet design. I love the color scheme that he has going there. It really matches the Mercedes as well. But now then, Bambino sitting in provisional pole with a 110.7. Will Stell spoil the party coming through the final chicane? Will he invalidate his lap? Yes, he will. Unfortunately, that is one of the many drivers today who we've seen invalidate their laps over and over again. Sets a 111.04, I believe, which would have been good enough for P3 on the board. But that's unfortunately not happening for him. Two drivers out at the moment. We can see Alupalu. Ooh, getting all squirrely there. Mitchell is now out on his outlap. And Rigo decides to come into the pits and abandon his. We can see the unknown elder slowing down to make room for the AlphaTauri of Pyro. Pyro comes through on his outlap. And now Alupalu now comes into the pits. So we're right on board with Mitchell, who's now finally decided to come out on the softs, deciding that he's had enough time to really get a feel for the track. So moving on to the faster tire compound to hopefully challenge for provisional pole as he goes extremely wide to make room, I believe, for the Mercedes driver. Yes, he has. And the Mercedes drivers let him right back through. Doesn't seem like Stowe's on a fantastic lap as well. He has invalidated his lap and has already missed out on provisional pole time as of now. But let's see as we ride on board with Mitchell, and he begins his second timed run on the first time run on the softs. Let's see what time he can set for himself. Coming into turn 1, keeps it very nice and tidy, avoiding to ride the curves there into turn 1, but does so on turn 2. It's a very complicated chicane. It's a downhill chicane. You can ride over the grass there quite heavily, but obviously it massively unsettles the car there. But Mitchell manages to keep it very nice and tidy, as we've seen him throughout the season keep it, avoiding lots of incidents, and he sets a purple sector 1. We can see Bambino, who is on provisional pole, also out for his outlap at the moment. Pyro on an outlap of his own, he is, and he's roughly 2/10 up. And we can see Mitchell now almost 5/10 up on his current lap time. So assuming that he keeps going at the pace that he is, he's definitely going to take provisional pole away from Bambino. It all comes down to the final chicane, where we've seen so many drivers struggling. And now, will Mitchell invalidate his lap? No, he will not. He keeps it very nice and tidy, very close to the wall of champions there. And now Mitchell comes across the line and sets himself a 110.2, roughly 5/10 faster than P2 at the moment. Let's look at what Pyro is setting. Coming through the fastest chicane there. DRS wide open. He comes across the line and sets for himself a 111.2 and promotes himself up into P4. It seems to be Bambino is beginning his outlap at the moment. Unknown Elder promoting himself up into a 111.0, I believe. Very decent lap from him. Now let's see if Bambino can fight back. He is roughly 5/10 down on Mitchell. So everything to gain for. We'll see if he's up by a substantial amount of time as he comes through the end of Sector 1, and no, he isn't. As a matter of fact, he's actually down on his current lap time, roughly 0.15 tenths. And we have a yellow flag in Sector 2. It seems to be the Alfa Romeo, and it is the Alfa Romeo of Italiano, who's parked horizontally on the road there. And Bambino's actually opted to back out of his lap and decides not to go forward with it, has decided to massively slow down. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what some of the other drivers are doing. So Adam at the moment manages to set a purple sector 1. He's currently P9 and no time set on the board. We saw that he invalidated his laps a few times. So the frustration may definitely be building, as he's going to be a lot more careful coming through the final chicane this time around. A 41.7 so far through sector 2. You can see the Alfa Romeo, who I'm assuming is the Italiano, getting out of the way there, making some room for the McLaren driver. Now then, Adam, will he invalidate his lap one more time? No, he will not. He keeps it very nice and tidy. And now coming towards the line, will finally set a lap time. Comes across the line, sets a 110.2, only 500ths away from Mitchell. What a fantastic lap for the McLaren driver. And now he finally gets himself on the board which I'm sure the frustration was definitely building, but he's finally done it. Alupalu, on the other hand, currently P5 in the Alfa Romeo. He has a 111.6, so 8 tenths away from Mitchell at the moment. It seems he's only 300ths of a second up on his current lap time. Oh, and has actually decided to abandon his lap, or may have had some sort of incident there? I'm not entirely too sure. Just drove onto the grass, and we can see the Williams of Bambino coming up from behind him now. Bambino, who opted to abandon his lap earlier, now I believe going for his actual timed run. So let's see if he can set anything competitive. Comes through the final chicane without invalidating it. Now comes across the line. Bambino manages to set a 110.6. So he did definitely improve on this occasion, but unfortunately it's not enough. He's still roughly 4 tenths off of Mitchell. And still, out of nowhere, in the Mercedes, manages to set a 110.6 as well, managing to promote himself up into P4. The only driver at the moment who hasn't set a lap time is Rigo. And as I say that, actually, never mind, Rigo comes across the line, sets a 110.4, promoting himself up into P3. So both Adam and Rigo, who showed struggles early on in the qualifying session, have massively improved as the session has progressed, and managed to promote themselves up into P2 and P3 respectively. Fantastic driving from them. This goes to show you that it's never really over in qualifying. And I believe Jaguar is also now beginning his timed run. Let's see what Mitchell's up to. Mitchell is now in the pits. Italiano just set a time. Bambino set a time. It seems like Stell was just giving some slipstream advantage to Ella, who has set a 112.2 at the moment, is 1.2 seconds up on his time. Assuming that he can keep up this pace, he may be going into the 110s. Now that coming towards the final chicane, has set a 112.2 at the moment. Currently P11, hasn't invalidated his lap. And now comes across the line and manages to set a 110.4. So all the runners near the end of the grid are actually showing massive amounts of improvement. We can maybe expect the same thing from Ishtar, who's roughly 7 tenths up on his current lap time. His previous lap time being a 112.0 and him being in P11 at the moment. So 7 tenths up roughly coming towards the end of Sector 2, and he's gotten roughly 7.5 tenths up on his current lap time. So 111.3 wouldn't promote him up too high, maybe around the P10 mark, but still one final corner to go, or a final collection of corners to go. And Mitchell now cementing his position in provisional pole, setting a 109.945, extending the gap, and Ishtar now comes across the line, sets a 111.4 and stays P11. Meanwhile, Mitchell with a 109.9 becomes the first driver to enter the 109s, and now has extended his gap to Adam by roughly 3 tenths. Ella currently in P3. I'm not too sure if he's on a run of his own at the moment. No, his DRS is closed, so that will most likely be it. Meanwhile, Unknown Elder promotes himself back up to P7 after improving to a 110.7. So it seems like drivers are mostly done with their few runs at the moment, and now are preparing to step out for their final few runs. Will Adam be able to challenge Mitchell? Only 3 tenths roughly to improve by, if he's looking forward to maybe making an impact to take provisional pole. Mitchell, meanwhile, slowly making his way back towards the pits. Still currently out on an outlap. So yeah, almost every driver now back into the pits other than Stell and Unknown Elder, who has unfortunately invalidated his lap and had a massive lockup there. I actually want to see if he's going to opt to... I think it would be a smart idea to go back into the pits now. Yeah, definitely. No reason to stay out. Just go back in and prepare. So every other driver other than Stell at the moment is back into the pits. We can see Bambino now coming out of the pits to begin his outlap, and a few of their other drivers following suit. Granted his position, I hope he doesn't run into any sort of traffic on his outlap, but as we spectate him, we'll see. So Stell at the moment on most likely his final run. Currently P6 with a 110.6. Obviously has his Mercedes teammate ahead of him, who will definitely be looking to help him through the slipstream. It says he's roughly a second down on his current lap time. I would be very surprised to believe so. It actually is. Okay, so still opting to break in the tires a bit more, letting them heat up properly before going for his final run. With only a minute 50 left to go, a lot of the drivers still opting to stay into the pit and staying in the pits. So by that logic, then the first driver to actually set a competitive lap time in the final few minutes of qualifying will be Bambino. So we're right on board with him. He did manage to set provisional pole earlier on in the session, but unfortunately that has been taken away from him, and he has slipped down into P5, and we see him backing out. Istra is now also retired from the session, and that's going to be the end of his run. So unfortunately, Mitchell is going to have his teammates starting from dead last on the grid. Ella now coming across the line. Seems like he's on a run of his own. Actually, beginning a run of his own. Trying to see which drivers are actually on a run and which aren't. So at the moment, it seems most drivers are now beginning their run. And as we can see, Adam has unfortunately spun out there on his outlap, going over to going off the track onto the pavement there. And unfortunately, the loss of grip has costed him. He should be able to hopefully make it. Yeah, definitely be able to make it back towards the line. And Mitchell now begins his final run as well. Ella, at the moment, roughly 1.3, roughly 13 tenths up on his time. Assuming that he can find the final few tenths, he may be challenging Mitchell for provisional pole, so let's see what he can set for himself. Is on an absolute flyer as well. Adam has now begun his time run, and we saw him getting a bit squirrely there. Sorry, I should probably see what Rigo is also. Oh, so Rigo's just beginning his time. Barely makes it to the line with roughly 3 seconds left to go. So now then, Ella comes across the line. What time will he set? Manages to set a 1:10.4. Has lost out significantly and will stay P3. Stell, on the other hand, his teammate does manage to overtake him and go P3 with a 1:10.403, beating his teammate by roughly 5/10 of a second. 5/100 of a second. My apologies. Meanwhile, Mitchell has unfortunately invalidated his run, so that's going to be the end of that. Adam, on the other hand, currently P2, has to improve by roughly 7 tenths. Not 7 tenths, 3 tenths, if he's looking to beat Mitchell. And with DRS wide open and him approaching the final corner, he's going to have to absolutely send it if he's looking to make it any bit closer. Goes over the curves, does not invalidate his run, and now comes across the line. What time will Adam set? Will he beat Mitchell? Comes across the line. No, he will not. Sets a 1:10.6. And by the looks of it, it doesn't look like any of the drivers are going to be massively improving. Meanwhile, Italiano currently P5 with a 1:10.4. Will he be able to spoil the party for any of the other drivers in the top 5? Does not invalidate his run. Comes towards the line. What time will Rigo set? Sets a 109.95 and manages to go P2 right below Mitchell. What a fantastic lap from him. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Mitchell manages to take pole position with a 109.944. Italiano very closely behind him, though, in P2 with a 109.995. Well, roughly 5/100 of a second slower than him. And then Adam in P3 with a 110.2. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, we now begin the formation lap around Canada, and we will be riding on board with Mitchell as we take a look at what tires every other driver is using. So, Mitchell and Rigo in the P1 and P2 opting to use the hards, meanwhile Adam in P3 opting to use the mediums. We can see both the Mercedes drivers opting to use the hards, followed by Bambino also using the mediums. So a bit of a mix between the grid. More of the drivers opting to use the hard tire compound, so we'll see how that comes into effect for them. Obviously, it's important to keep in mind that the walls are very close to each other, and seeing as how drivers were struggling with track limits and, spinning out as such, it'll be interesting to see if any of the drivers come into collision with the walls there and if we have any safety cars come out on track. 35 laps around this circuit, very long race. Well, not that long, but decently long. So it's going to be definitely a test of resilience and mental fortitude, as drivers are going to try to keep it on track consistently for lap after lap. Ishtar washed. Unfortunate for him that he started at the back of the grid, and both him and his teammates starting at polar opposite ends. And as we can see there, Ishtar actually spinning out there. So, yeah, say what you want about him. He's definitely an entertaining driver. I like his helmet as well, the black and red suit the Ferrari. I never get a chance to really talk about that. The helmet designs some of these drivers have chosen for themselves are actually very, very decent. Let's take a look here. So I said, obviously Stell's, I believe, helmet was very new. Yes, it was Stell's helmet. As we can see, Mitchell spin out and drive straight into the wall there, as he was trying to do some burnouts and warm up his tires. So back to what you were saying, Blood. Spinning out is not a sign of you're a noob, and we can see Mitchell angling his car as to cover off Rigo at the start of the race. And we can see Ishtar doing some more donuts in the background for our entertainment as he gets disqualified from the session. But regardless, ladies and gentlemen, not many drivers on the grid today, but we should be in store for a good race. There's 5 red lights. It's lights out and away we go here for the Canadian Grand Prix, and we can see Rigo got a fantastic jump off the line there and has already overtaken Mitchell going into turn 1, and around the outside gets the move done, and now we can see Adam getting very involved with Mitchell, and Mitchell unfortunately being squeezed out of position there, has lost 2 positions at the start of the race, with Adam being jumped up with Adam jumping up a position and Rigo jumping up a position. Meanwhile, Bambino in P4. Looking at the back of the grid, I don't think there's been any major incidents. As we can see, Ella's unfortunately spun out there and had some sort of incident of his own. Going back towards the front of the grid, we can take a look. Bambino now following very closely behind Mitchell, hoping to get him early on in the race. Alu back in Tier 1 is nice. Yeah, it's lovely to see some of the old drivers back in Tier 1 and where they actually deserve to be racing. And we can see the predicted pit stop strategies there as Mitchell now looks towards diving down the inside, but nothing doing yet. Meanwhile, Bambino breaks super late and dives down the inside of Mitchell and manages to make the move stick. There was a bit of contact between the drivers, but Bambino manages to promote himself up into P3. So the nightmares for Mitchell continues after the end of the first lap. He's unfortunately dropped down into P4. Looking down the grid, we can see Jaguar maybe looking to make a move on Pyro, but decides to back out of it on this occasion. And now Alu Palu right on the rear spoiler of Jaguar, opting to go around the outside and manages to make the move stick. Alu promoting himself up into P8. So some fantastic overtakes that we're seeing here early on in the race, and we can see Jaguar looking to maybe make an overtake there, but decides to back out of it. Realizes that there's no point in maybe taking a risk like that. Meanwhile, we can see Adam closing the gap to Rigo. A driver that struggled very on in this race is Mitchell at the moment, who is unfortunately 5/10 down on P3 at the moment. Obviously no DRS enabled just as yet, and we can see already Stealth falling outside the DRS zone of the car in front of him, and we see a car that spun out. There's been a collision between a few cars there, both Ishtar and Alu coming into a collision, and they both spin out. Alu now in P10 and Ishtar in P11. Bringing our attention back up the grid, we can see Adam a bit too far back, most likely to make any sort of moves heading into the fast chicane at the end of the track. But will we see any other developments from the rest of the grid? Nothing doing yet. And as lap 3 of 25 begins, we can see Adam has set the fastest lap time of the race so far with a 1:13.6. And now race control has enabled DRS, so a lot more overtaking opportunities will open up for a few of the drivers as that rear flap opens up and gains them an extra 15 to 20 kilometers per hour. Unknown Elder picking up the first time penalty as well for track invalidations. 3 seconds added onto his finishing total. Now Adam with DRS wide open, trying to hunt down Rigo as fast as he can. It doesn't look like he's going to be close enough on this occasion, but assuming that he can line himself up and get a good run out of this upcoming hairpin, we may be looking at a potential change of the lead. So let us now ride on board with Adam as he lines himself up to make a possible move on Rigo. Rigo most likely using every bit of battery that he has. And now with DRS wide open, will Adam be able to make this move before the beginning of the corner? We can see he's going. Adam's actually choosing to go around the inside, going towards the inside, and manages to make the move before the corner even begins, promoting himself up into P1. Mitchell, meanwhile, hanging in there with the top 3. DRS open, he still isn't able to make a move. We can see Jaguar and Pyro coming into a battle of their own. Pyro looks to have, despite not, looks like Jaguar managed to make the overtake with DRS, and Pyro had no choice but to tuck behind him and utilize the slipstream to his advantage, unfortunately. Lap 4 of 35, and we've already had so much action in this race. Oh, Rigo getting a bit squirrely there. Will that compromise him? And will Bambino be able to capitalize on this and maybe make an overtake? It doesn't seem to be the case. A bit too far back once again. And now, will Adam be able to defend from this? Obviously, he doesn't have DRS now as there's no car in front of him. So he's obviously going to be at a bit of a disadvantage heading down the DRS zone. Oh, it looked like Rigo missed a bit of the apex there, but it doesn't look like he's lost too much time. Roughly 8/10 down on Adam at the moment, but meanwhile Bambino right on the rear spoiler of Rigo. But obviously with that DRS advantage, it doesn't look like Rigo's going to really lose out on a position here. And the top 4 order stays the same. Unknown Elder, on the other hand, with his DRS, obviously having a 3-second time penalty is not helping him, but looking to get past Stell regardless. Unable to do so heading into turn 1. You see Bambino basically pushing Rigo along here. He's going to have to be careful as to not tap the rear end. Spin him out, as I believe Alu Palu and Ishtar now coming into a battle of their own. So the Alfa Romeo and the Ferrari, both Ferrari engines coming into a battle. And it seems like Ishtar is going to come out ahead with his medium tires, managing to promote himself up into P10. And Rigo unfortunately picks up a 3-second time penalty, so that's going to cost him dearly with both Mitchell and Bambino right behind him. So how will Italiano deal with this situation now? You can see Bambino lining himself up very nicely, hoping to maybe take advantage of Rigo's 3-second time penalty and the confusion and the panic that he must have instilled onto him. Regardless, DRS wide open. Will he be able to make this overtake at the end of the corner? No, at the end of the straight. No, he will not. Once again, the DRS train coming into full effect there. 3 drivers at the moment have picked up penalties, those being Rigo, Unknown Elder, and Jaguar. And we see Unknown Elder, speaking of which, trying to get closer to Stell, but once again, unable to make the move stick. He's too far back. Any potential overtakes between these two? Nope, nothing doing yet. Now Adam taking advantage of the situation, pulling away from Rigo almost. He's got him outside the 1-second gap, and will Rigo have DRS? It seems that he does. Managed to get away lucky on this occasion, but he has to get right. But actually, I don't think he has DRS. No, I believe he doesn't, especially not heading down towards the next DRS zone as they go over the detection point, and Rigo's unfortunately over a second behind Adam, so he will not have DRS on this occasion. Oh, and gets very squarely on the exit there, and now Bambino is going to definitely be looking to capitalize on this, already on the rear spoiler of Rigo. And with DRS wide open, the Williams now going around the outside of the Alfa Romeo. Manages to get the move done very early on, but will Mitchell be able to capitalize on this? And no, he will not. Rigo gets dropped down into P3. So after the fantastic start he had and managed to put himself up into the lead of the race, Rigo's also dropped down into P3. And Mitchell now getting very involved in making this overtake on Rigo. Both drivers going side by side, the Alfa Romeo and the Ferrari. We saw this at the end of the grid, and now at the front. Now Mitchell trying to keep it around the outside, but Rigo with the inside line manages to defend that position very nicely and hangs on into P3. But obviously Mitchell will be looking to get past Rigo as soon as possible. Because as soon as he does, he can maybe push forward for Bambino and Adam, who at the moment are just pulling away from Rigo. Luckily for him, he does have DRS to hold onto his position down this DRS zone. We have a yellow flag in Sector 2, and that's once again Ishtar, whose struggles continue in this race. And we can see Mitchell trying to get the switchback or maybe going towards the inside line, but unfortunately can't do anything just as yet. Now Rigo, will he have DRS? No, he will not. So now Mitchell with DRS wide open, trying to close the gap as soon as possible. We can see the red flashing light on Bambino, signifying that he has less than 10% ERS. So he definitely used up all his battery to get to the position that he's at right now. And now out of the wall of champions, will Mitchell be able to make a move? No, he will not. We can see the flashing red light of Italiano now showing that they're struggling. And Mitchell picks up a 3-second time penalty, a very rare penalty for your championship leader, as he's currently P4 and picks up a 3-second time penalty. Luckily for him, a bunch of the drivers behind him struggling with the same issue. But it's definitely going to haunt him if he can't get past Adam and Bambino. You can see the gap to Bambino at the moment is 1.3 seconds, so Adam is pulling away. And Mitchell just unable to get past Rigo, who manages to bring himself within the DRS range of the car in front of him once again. This is obviously for the final step on the podium. And now, once again, oh, as the car's gone off track, and it seems to be Adam. Adam, who's leading the race, has gone completely off track and is completely missing a front wing there. What happened? One can only assume that out of the hairpin, he must have lost traction and drove into the wall there. But that's going to be absolutely terrible for him, as he has to dart into the pits to fix his front wing. And he also manages to pick up a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So Adam's nightmares continue on lap 9 to 35. He was doing so well. But unfortunately, that incident there is going to cost him very heavily. We'll have to see and keep an eye on him to see if he can fight back towards the front of the grid. And now Bambino is your race leader. And a driver that this spells that this is a massive benefit to is Mitchell. Of course, we saw that Adam had massively pulled away from Bambino, but now Bambino's actually within reach for your championship leader. And with DRS wide open, he's still unable to get past Rigo, who has DRS himself. Oh, and that exit compromised Rigo very heavily there, as he may have just... I'm not too sure if that compromised him or not, but it seems like... But regardless, Mitchell has gotten past Rigo now, and now has promoted himself up into P2, and that frees up Mitchell to maybe target Bambino. 9.5 tenths separating both P1 and P2. We see Jaguar in P4, 6.2 seconds behind P3. Just shows you in what league the top 3 runners are at the moment. If you're just joining us, then welcome. This is we are racing at Canada. It is lap 10 of 35. At the moment, Bambino leads your race despite Mitchell getting pole position. We can see Unknown Elder actually opting to come in and change off of his tires, his 8-lap-old hards, and switching onto the mediums now. And we can see Mitchell and Bambino now beginning to drop Rigo off, as it's become nearly a 2-horse race. And Stell has retired from the session, and that's going to be the end of the line for the end of the road for the Mercedes drivers. Unfortunately, not had a fantastic run in this race, and as Adam picks up another 3-second time penalty, his nightmares continue. So from going to leading the race to dropping down to P8 and picking up a handful of penalties, he's definitely not going to be pleased with himself. And we can see Bambino now struggling with ERS management. Now then, will Mitchell be able to capitalize on this and make a move heading into turn 1? No, he will not. A bit too far back. on this occasion. And now Pyro picks up a 3-second time penalty. So while we have the chance, why not just take a look at how many penalties everyone has. So Mitchell, Rigo, Jaguar, and Pyro all have 3-second time penalties, and they're all within the top 5. Meanwhile, Adam has 8 seconds worth of penalties and is in P8. And Unknown Elder, of course, also having 3 seconds and in P10. It's a very difficult race to stay clean in. But Bambino showing great patience and great awareness to his track limits to stay 11 laps in and without a penalty at the moment. But of course, you can avoid penalties as much as you want, but if you can't prevent the other car from overtaking you, then that's always going to be a problem. As we once again now see Mitchell lining himself up to get a better exit and maybe making a possible overtake on Bambino. DRS wide open, lap 11 to 35, heading down towards the final few corners of this track. Will Mitchell dive down the inside? Will he make a move? No, he will not. Decides to tuck right behind Bambino once again and lines himself up with DRS wide open once again, heading down the pit straight. Has Mitchell done enough to maybe make a possible overtake heading into turn 1? No, he has not. This being the current closest battle out on track at the moment, the second closest also being between Alu and Ella. And obviously they're not within DRS range of each other. As we can see now, Rigo has unfortunately dropped down 1.5 seconds behind Mitchell. And as I say that, Alu's actually brought it within 7/10 of a second to Ella, but unfortunately at the moment I'm going to keep my attention towards the front of the grid as I don't want to miss the overtake for the lead of the race. We'll keep our eyes on that, as well as the gap between Alu and Ella now comes down to 5/10. So an overtake that's been brewing for a few laps now. We've seen Mitchell time and time again get very close to overtaking Bambino, but unfortunately just doesn't have enough juice to maybe make the move. But now, will he be able to do so? And once again, not able to make the overtake stick. Bambino somehow or the other hanging on to the lead of the race. But heading down towards turn 1, we can see the ERS issues for Bambino continue, but once again, his consistent driving manages to keep him in the lead. Looking down the grid, Alu Palu trying to close the gap towards Ella. I don't think there's going to be an overtake through those tight, twisty sections unless someone makes a mistake. But now Alu, currently in P7, trying to make a move on Ella. And it doesn't look like he's going to be close enough to making an overtake either. As Adam sets the fastest time of the race with a 1:13.4, obviously currently in P8. But is making up a lot of time, was 5.4 seconds behind Alu and has brought that down to 3.2 in the span of roughly 2 laps, or 1.5. Unknown Elder now setting the fastest lap of the race with a 1:13.2. It's about the McLaren drivers trading fastest laps. Well, that's right on board with Mitchell, and we can see just how far back he is, but with the DRS he is gaining. He's gaining ever so slowly on Bambino, but once again too far back. Bambino manages to hold himself off very nicely through Sector 2 to create enough of a gap that doesn't allow Mitchell to really catch up during the DRS zones. So it could just be that Bambino is just simply quicker through Sector 2. Bambino obviously did make that fantastic lunge to overtake Mitchell earlier on in the race. And Mitchell's definitely going to be looking to return the favor right back to him. And on this occasion, it seems Mitchell's a lot closer, DRS wide open in the second DRS zone of this track. He's almost going side by side with the Williams. But once again, decides to back out of it. We know Mitchell's a very patient driver, and so he'll bide his time to make the move as soon as he deems right. And now it does seem right. He's going to send it down the inside, locks up his tires very slightly there. And now with the inside line, Mitchell, after absolutely sending it, trying to make the overtake stick, they're still side by side, heading into the DRS zone. And now with DRS enabled, it doesn't seem like anything's going to really be there to stop Mitchell from making this complete overtake. And Mitchell now takes lead of the race in lap 14 of 35. And we saw Bambino there nearly driving into the back of Mitchell as he darted straight for the pits in lap 14 to 35, switching off of his medium tires onto the hards. and Mitchell, of course, on his hard tires, opting to stay out at the moment. That was a very near collision there between the front two runners. Luckily, they avoided such an incident. And now with the gap slowly opening up, we can take a look at where the rest of the battles are taking place. So Alupalo currently P7, roughly 1.4 seconds behind 1.4 seconds behind Bambino, who is, I believe, coming out of the pits right now on his hard tires. Has managed to come out in P6. Meanwhile, Adam, 7/10 separating him and Alu. We saw that gap earlier was 5.4, now 7/10. He's brought it within a second. We know Adam has the pace to keep up with the front runners. So let's see if he can manage to get past this traffic as soon as possible, as his teammate manages to set the fastest lap once again with a 1:13.1, and with DRS wide open. Will Adam be able to make the overtake in the second DRS zone? No, he will not. Or, well, technically first. But it does line himself up very nicely to maybe make a move into the hairpin. He dives down the inside of the Alfa Romeo. He was going around the outside, but managed to switch it back at the last second. Luckily avoided a collision with Alu and manages to promote himself up into P7 now. With DRS wide open, Adam will hopefully be able to pull away from Alu, but it doesn't seem to be the case, as Alu is keeping right up with Adam. Will Alu send it down the inside? No, he will not. Decides to back out of it on this occasion and allows Adam to retain P7. And at the front of the grid, we can see Jaguar has come into the pits now. So I'm not too sure why it's showing me. Yeah, there we go. So now Jaguar had come into the pits and switched onto the hard tires as well. And after clearing Alu, we can see Adams now very slowly beginning to pull away, as Alu picks up a 3-second time penalty for driving over the curbs and for a track invalidation. So at the moment, we're nearly halfway through this race. At the moment, Mitchell, Rigo, and Pyro lead your race. All three of the drivers have decided not to pit at the moment, and all three drivers also have penalties, which I can only assume will most definitely come into play near the end of the race. But as of now, they're fine. We know the expected pit window is roughly around lap 20 for the hard, so we'll see if any other drivers are looking to undercut or overcut the rest of the grid. There's really nobody really close to each other at the moment. I guess we can spectate Adam at the moment, who's on a blitzing pace, trying to make it through the pack as soon as possible. Excuse me. The driver in front of him now is Ella in the Mercedes. And with just a little bit over halfway left to go in the race, we'll have to see if he can make this comeback stick. He is currently on 8-lap-old hards, so they have quite the challenge to last as long as they have to, but assuming that he can nurture them, and if we have any virtual safety cars or safety cars, that would greatly help him out. And we can see Adam now bringing the gap down within a second. I don't think it's going to be enough to get DRS on the driver in front of him, because he did, when they crossed over the detection point, there was still a 1-second gap. But regardless, Adam, with the pace that he has, about to make a dive down the inside of Ella, but decides to back out of it and lines himself up to maybe make an overtake down the DRS zone, down the pit straight. And now heading into turn 1, we can see Adam heading towards the inside line and heading into the next corner. Actually, Adam deciding to back out of it. Very surprising that he didn't decide to just lunge it down the inside, but decides to play it smart and not cause a collision or risk a collision with the driver in front of him. This is what I was talking about. Adam definitely has the pace to keep up with the front runners, and we can see that with the way he's managing to cut himself through traffic. But obviously he has to get past this Mercedes to come into a battle with Bambino, who's roughly 6.5 seconds ahead. Will Adam make a dive into the hairpin? Yes, he will. A lot of drivers opting to use this hairpin spot to make their overtake stick, and it doesn't look like Ella is going to be able to get the switchback there as Adam covers off the exit very nicely. And now with DRS, well, I'm assuming Adam is basically going to be uncatchable now for Ella, and now that opens up his opportunities to challenge the cars ahead of him. He has Bambino and the Williams in front of him now. Bambino roughly 5 seconds ahead, and obviously without a time penalty. And we can see Ella becoming one of the first few drivers who started off on their hards and hasn't come in for an unconditional pit stop, switching on to the mediums in lap 19 of 35, going for the undercut on the rest of the grid. Oh, Bambino getting very close to the wall there. Hopefully he didn't come into collision with it and manages to avoid any sort of wing damage. We can see the gap to him and Pyro is roughly 1.6 seconds. Unknown Elder, after 8 laps on his mediums, decides to come into the pits, and we can see the McLaren team changing his front wing there as Istra picks up a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. And as we're nearing the pit window for the hards, it's only a matter of time before some of these drivers decide to come into the pits. You see Istra's definitely in there, switching onto the medium tire compounds, and as Bambino now finally picks up his 3-second time penalty as we expected, and him going over the curbs there, and unfortunately that's going to give him a 3-second time penalty as well. And it's basically a level playing field for everybody. Ella currently the only driver at the moment without a time penalty. What a sight it would be to behold if every single driver on the grid finishes with a time penalty, but that's to be expected at a track like Canada. But if assuming that he can keep up this pace, he definitely will. Second or third DRS zone, depending on. And now we can see Bambino lining himself up to maybe make an overtake on Pyro. This is for 3rd place on the grid at the moment. Bambino on the 5-lap-old hards, Pyro on the 19-lap-old hards, and we can see Mitchell and Rigo, both the front runners, opting to go into the pits. Will Pyro follow suit? Yes, he will. And now let us see if Mitchell comes out ahead of Bambino, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to. He has to go the long way around the corner. And now, actually, never mind. Mitchell does manage to retain P1, and now Bambino comes out right behind Mitchell. So at the moment, after those pit stops, Mitchell has now moved on to the medium tire compounds and is now roughly a second up on Bambino, but obviously has his cold medium tires to deal with. So Bambino is going to try to take advantage of that and maybe use that to catch up to Mitchell, but it doesn't seem like it's going to help him out for too long, as the mediums are the faster tires to be on. 14 laps left to go in the race. The gap between Bambino and Mitchell at the moment is roughly 0.8 of a second. We can see Adam now getting back up into P3. Obviously after his nightmare started at the start of the grid. Oh, we have a yellow flag in Sector 3. And that is Unknown Elder. He is moving out on track, so luckily for us, I don't think we're going to have a safety car on this occasion. Otherwise, that would have been a very interesting twist to the race. But luckily for us, we are still under green flag conditions. But as I was saying earlier, Adam has managed to bring himself back up into P3, albeit on 12-lap-old hards, but he would really be hoping for a safety car near the end of the race. And we have another yellow flag in Sector 2, and I believe that's Unknown Elder once again. Struggle is definitely continuing for the McLaren driver, as he's unfortunately unable to get the right amount of grip on his tires. This is costing him dearly. Meanwhile, Rigo within a second of Adam. Adam, of course, on his 13-lap-old hards. Meanwhile, Rigo on his 1-lap-old mediums. We cannot forget about the Alfa Romeo driver. Wow, Rigo showing phenomenal pace in Tier 1. It's almost like this is the tier him, Blood, and everybody else should be racing in. It's crazy. Regardless, DRS wide open. Now, Rigo. Will he be able to make the move on Adam? No, he will not. Mitchell manages to set the fastest time of the race with a 1:12.3. And now, DRS wide open. We have a retirement in the pits in the form of Unknown Elder. And there's only 9 drivers running in this race now. And once again, Rigo just unfortunately a bit too far back to make the overtake stick on Adam. This is for the final step on the podium. And we can see Bambino now, the gap to Mitchell massively increasing. 3 seconds is the gap to Mitchell. Quite the coincidence that we have that one of the McLaren drivers is currently fighting for the podium. The other driver is unfortunately retired. Meanwhile, the Ferrari drivers, one is fighting for the win. The other is unfortunately retired. Oh, or well, the other one's unfortunately in P9 at the moment. Adam going very deep there, and now will this open up an opportunity for Rigo? He is right on the rear spoiler of Adam. DRS wide open now then. Will Rigo be able to make this overtake? I don't think there should be anything stopping him. A bit confused there, but he goes a bit defensive there. And now Rigo, before the corner even begins, and right before the straight ends, as a matter of fact, Rigo manages to make the overtake stick and promotes himself up into P3. Will Adam be fighting this position back? It looks like he's not done with Rigo just as yet. Will he dive around the outside? No, he will not. A bit too far back on this occasion. And there it goes, Adam. Adam on his 15-lap-old R's unfortunately loses control of the car. May have clipped the curb there a bit too much and has unfortunately spun out. Luckily for him, no wing damage and he hasn't lost any positions out. But that battle that he was having with Rigo has unfortunately it's caused a massive gap there now to Rigo. And Adam now sits 6.4 seconds behind P3. Very unfortunate for him as the nightmares continue for the McLaren driver. He's had a fantastic run through the pack to catch up to the position that he was at right now, but the loss of grip is going to cost him dearly. Meanwhile, looking at the back behind him, Pyro roughly 5.5 tenths behind Jaguar. Now Pyro trying to line himself up to make an overtake for P5. But obviously something that Pyro will definitely not be liking is the fact that Jaguar is going to be taking advantage of the slipstream and the DRS from the car in front of him. And with DRS wide open, actually never mind, it doesn't look like Jaguar actually got DRS from the car in front of him, but regardless, he's still within that DRS detection point. So in the next DRS zone, he definitely will. Whoa, Pyro massively sending it through that corner. Jaguar being very hesitant through there, and Pyro nearly coming into collision with the rear end of the Haas driver in front of him. And this battle is once again very close together now, and if we can see Pyro going down the inside of Jaguar, saw a little bit of an opening and decided to send it in, but unfortunately just doesn't have the right amount of momentum to keep that run going, and Jaguar retains P5 for now. And we can see this battle with Pyro is costing Jaguar dearly as he's once again outside of the DRS range of Adam. And now Pyro trying to line himself up to make a better overtake. As I wish we had better camera angles. I really want to stop riding on board, but unfortunately this is the best we're getting at the moment. There we go. And now heading towards the longest DRS straight on the track at the moment. Will Pyro be able to take advantage of Jaguar's lack of pace? And we'll have to see. So with DRS wide open, now Pyro approaches Jaguar. He's slowly gaining on the Haas driver. Pyro going defensive into the next corner, and now Pyro with the inside line manages to make the overtake stick and promotes himself up into P5. That move was brewing for quite a while now, so it's still good to see Pyro manage to make that move stick. We have a yellow flag in Sector 1. Not entirely too sure what happened there, but it doesn't look like there was a massive issue. It might have just been Ishtar getting out of the way for the front runners as to not cause any hindrance to them. And now Pyro closing the gap to Adam. So Pyro on an absolute flyer knows he has the tire advantage with his 5-lap-old mediums as compared to the 17-lap-old hards from Adam. It is lap 26 of 35, 9 more laps to go. And with 9 laps left to go, I don't think Adam's hards are going to be lasting towards the end of the race. So that idea to maybe go long and hope for a safety car not really coming into his use at the moment. So now Pyro with DRS once again wide open, 4/10 separating him and P4. Will he be able to make the overtake stick on Adam? He's slowly gaining on the McLaren driver ahead of him, and as they head towards the chicane, it doesn't look like Pyro's going to be close enough. But maybe he thought about diving down the inside, trying to compromise Adam's exit out of the chicane there. And now with DRS once again heading towards turn one, Pyro, will he be able to make this overtake stick on Adam? Unfortunately not, and Adam retains P4 for the moment. So we saw that Pyro with the outside line trying to force Adam into a mistake there. Unfortunately, it just didn't work, but it was a smart idea. You can see Adam's rear tire clipping the wall there. He's going to have to be extremely careful so that he doesn't get a puncture, especially with how worn out his tires are at the moment. It's only a matter of time before Pyro can get past Adam with his tire advantage, so let's see if he can do something on this occasion. No, he cannot. But as we head down to the favorite overtaking spot for all the drivers, we've seen a ton of overtakes heading into this hairpin. Will it be any different on this occasion? Apparently it will, as Pyro... Oh, never mind. Pyro brakes super late, and it was a very last-ditch move by Pyro as he manages to overtake Adam at the absolute last second there. Luckily for him, he managed to avoid the collision, and Pyro manages to promote himself up into P4. Very late braking there from the AlphaTauri driver. That was an unbelievable move. Great awareness from both drivers as to not come into collision with one another. But now Adam definitely going to be trying to fight this position back. It has no DRS of his own, but definitely got a better run heading in towards turn one with the inside line now. Adam trying to battle with Pyro. They both come into contact with each other, and that throws Adam massively off guard. And now Pyro with the inside line manages to retain the position. There was a bit of collision there between the drivers. They're still banging wheels with each other. Heading down the chicane, a place where both cars cannot fit through. And unfortunately, Adam comes out with the short end of the stick, losing out not only the position, but a few valuable seconds. Actually managing to lose out position to Jaguar as well, who unfortunately outbrakes himself there and manages to go back into P6. So Adam now jumping back into P5, Pyro retaining P4. That wasn't a smart decision to go side by side heading into that corner there, but regardless, luckily for Adam, he didn't have any wing damage or spin out, so we'll see if he can manage to catch up to Pyro, but with his 19 lap old hards, I severely doubt that. 7 laps to go in this race. It's only a matter of time before Adam really starts feeling the wear and tear on those tires. He may make it to the end, but I would be very surprised. Most likely going to be absolutely exhausted. And a potential move that's actually building up near the front of the grid. We can see, actually, we have a bit of time before that. Meanwhile, Adam and Jaguar now going side by side through the fast chicane. Adam unfortunately has to drive massively over the curves there along with Jaguar. And Adam picks up a 3-second time penalty. Jaguar managing to avoid a penalty as such. And Adam managing to retain P5 at the moment. Doing absolutely everything in his power to stay as high up on the grid as he possibly can. Meanwhile, Rigo has managed to close the gap to Bambino significantly. 0.6 of a second separating him and P2. So Bambino at the moment currently on his 14-lap old hards. Rigo on his 8-lap old mediums. 6 laps left to go in this race. Oh, a bit squirrely on the exit there. It didn't look like it helped Rigo out a lot. Luckily, he doesn't lose out on DRS on this occasion, and will be gaining on Bambino throughout this entire straight. I don't think he's close enough to make an overtake. No, he is not, but assuming that he can keep up the pace that he's been showing through the rest of the laps, I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, Rigo now roughly 3.5 tenths behind Bambino, but once again, a bit too far back to send any dives down turn one. Looking down the grid, we can see Jaguar and Adam now coming into a battle once again. P5 and P6. We've seen this battle, this move building up for quite a while now, and because Adam is holding up Jaguar so significantly, Ella has managed to catch up to the grid as well, to the rest of the pack. So now it's a 3-way fight for P5 as there's a bit of collision between Ella and Jaguar there as Ella drives into the rear end of Jaguar. Luckily, nobody's spinning out yet. Attendance 10 out of 10? Yeah, absolutely, man. We had to get reserves in and we still only got 11. And we have a yellow flag in Sector 1. Who is that? Oh, that is Ishtar. Okay, I was worried for a second. I thought that was Mitchell. Right then, Rigo. You saw that he was trying to make the move stick earlier last lap, but unfortunately he's a bit too far back right now. But with 5 tenths separating him and P2 with DRS wide open. Will Rigo be able to make the overtake before the corner even begins? He's slowly gaining on Bambino. He's going to look towards diving down the inside, heading into the chicane there. We've seen drivers try to make this move stick, and unfortunately, once again, we've seen Rigo, who managed to make the overtake, but unfortunately picks up a 3-second time penalty as doing so by driving over the curbs. Oh, hold on, sorry, I'll read that in just a second. Oh, and there's a massive battle going on there with Jaguar and Adam. Both drivers massively coming together and touching wheels. And we can see Adam, who unfortunately drove into the wall there along with Ella. Two drivers who have unfortunately spun out and come into a massive collision there. And we can see Adam reversing and, by the looks of it, trying to go back into the pits. Meanwhile, Ella, where is Ella? Ella attempting to do the same thing by the looks of it. Both drivers struggling to get back into the pits. There's only 5 laps left to go, and we can most definitely expect a we're gonna most definitely expect a report at the end of the session as Ella, unfortunately frustrated, retires from the race. It was a big battle there. We saw that Adam and Jaguar were coming into a collision earlier. They were bumping tires, but. Yeah, that's very unfortunate. Right, Erminator saying, I mean, when even Pyro can be P4, you must question the credibility of the race. To be fair, I'll hand it to Pyro. He's made some fantastic overtakes throughout this entire race, though. Yeah, we've had really low attendance, but for what it's worth, he's given us some fun racing to watch, so I respect that. Why the Pyro slander? There's always Pyro slander. Bambino now roughly 8/10 behind Rigo, roughly 3. Oh, and Rigo spun out! And Rigo's DNF from the session with 3 laps left to go. He's had a fantastic race throughout the session, and we have a very, very late safety car. In lap 32 of 35, I'm sorry, Rigo's unfortunately DNF from the session, and we have a safety car. What will this mean for Bambino? Will Bambino dart into the pits and try to switch onto a faster tire compound? Mitchell currently 12.4 seconds ahead from the rest of the pack. We started off with 11 drivers. We're now down to 7. Oh, you're absolutely right. When with that retirement, Pyro gets promoted up into P3. So Pyro is on track to get a podium here. If Pyro finishes on the podium, I will do race interviews at the end of this race. I stopped doing them because nobody would really attend them other than Mitchell. But if Pyro wins this race, I will happily do post-race commentary, post-race interviews. And we can see Mitchell now coming into the pits, Bambino coming into the pits. Both drivers opting to most likely switch onto the hard softs. As we see, Mitchell has now gone onto the softs. I'd be very surprised if Bambino went on to anything else, and no, he has none. No, he hasn't. And now will Pyro dart in? Yes, he will. 5.3 seconds separating him and Jaguar, feeling there's no need to stay out. And this race has become just that much more interesting. Lap 33 of 35. Pyro slanders you Sundays, so I gotta get him back. Jaguar obviously also coming into the pit, so almost every driver coming into the pits to switch onto the soft tire compounds. Did Pyro manage to get through? Yes, he has, luckily for him. And now we ride on board with Mitchell. None of the pack has closed up with each other. If we look at the track map on the bottom right, how's it looking with Pens? Very bad. Absolutely, absolutely terrible. Bambino has a drive-through. Oh, I didn't even realize Bambino has a drive-through, so that means Pyro's finishing P2. Assuming that he can maybe open up the gap to Jaguar by roughly 3 seconds, we may be looking at a Pyro coming in P2, and the safety car is coming in 1 lap. The only 2 drivers who have caught up to each other at the moment are Mitchell and Bambino. The rest of the grid are nowhere near close to them at the moment. Massive drama in the last few laps of this race. Will Pyro be able to catch up to the grid? He's trying his best to get to them as soon as possible, and now Mitchell decides to go, catches Bambino slightly off guard, but Bambino with that drive-through penalty, unfortunately, I don't think he's really going to be challenging Mitchell too much for the lead of this race. He could go straight towards the end, or would that disqualify him? That would most definitely disqualify him. But as things are running at the moment, Pyro may be finishing P2, assuming that he can create a 3-second gap to Jaguar behind him. We started with 11 drivers, and we're now down to 7. Void lap 32. Nobody. Regardless, looking towards the front of the grid, even though this is a battle that really seemingly has no purpose other than really for ego. Bambino trying to close the gap to Mitchell as soon as possible. We have a yellow flag in sector 3, and that's Adam, who's DNF from the session. Unfortunately for him, now Ishtar picks up a 3-second time penalty. What is happening in Canada? There's only 2 laps left to go. And Bambino will most definitely have to serve his penalty in this lap. Pyro trying to create a gap to Jaguar behind him, but in the span of 1 lap, will he be able to do so? If we get under 5 finishes for the race, then it's void. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm completely okay with that. As Bambino now comes into the pits to serve his drive-through penalty, Mitchell sets the fastest time of the race. Now Pyro, with his 6 seconds of penalties, is gonna desperately try to break away from Jaguar. We are on the final lap of this race. Only 6 drivers remain out of 11. Unfortunately for Bambino, he does manage to come out in P4, but unfortunately for him, he's 4.6 seconds behind Jaguar, who's absolutely sending it, trying to capitalize on this and come ahead of Pyro as they're nearing the end of this race. Mitchell, on the other hand, basically on his Sunday drive, especially to the final part of this race, and it seems like Pyro's just unable to break away from Jaguar at the moment. Now the gap coming within almost a second. But after all the chaos and all the commotion that we've had throughout this race, why does Bambino still have a drive-through? I'm not entirely too sure. But regardless, after all the commotion and all the chaos that has taken place in this race, there's only really one winner that we can have, and it has to be Mitchell. So after the crazy start he's had, the terrible first stint that he had in this race, Mitchell comes across the line and wins the Canadian Grand Prix. Pyro, on the other hand, will come across the line and finish in P2, but unfortunately, because of his penalty, will drop down to P3. But congratulations to Pyro for finishing on the podium. Bambino comes across the line, finishes in P4. Alupalu manages to pick up on, oh wow, 20-second time penalty for Bambino there. So now Alupalu finishes up in P4. Bambino drops to P5. And Ishtar, our lone warrior who's seemingly struggled throughout the entire race, comes across the line and finishes in P6. What a chaotic race. Right, I have to get everybody in for post-race comms interviews because, wow. I'm only doing this because Pyro finished on the podium. What a crazy race that was. Right, I'm not watching any of that. What a fantastic race, if you can call it that. Every single driver finishing up with penalties. Mitchell coming across the line to win, and Pyro getting penalties, getting his podium as well. Hello, hello, Mitchell. Long time no talk.
Hello. Yeah, no.
How have you been,
It's
man?
been a while.
Congratulations on winning the Canadian Grand Prix after the absolute shit show this race was. Talk me through it, man. How are you feeling?
Um, yeah, it was a good race. It was a good race. It was a shit start for me. But worked my way through the pack, and
Y-
even the undercut by Bambino didn't help, and I just stayed in front and control
Right.
after that point. It was good.
No, definitely. You had a very rough start to your race. Like, you started off on pole and then unfortunately dropped down into P3 after the start. It must have been difficult getting back past everyone, especially granted it's so easy to get time penalties on a
Yeah.
track like this.
I was struggling so hard following other cars. I was getting left, right, and center extents and cuts and everything. Then
No.
Spilsy spins half in front of me, and I lose the place on Bambino as well. It was great.
Yeah. Any panics at the end of the race when you got that final safety car?
Um, there's always, because there's like, do I pit or not? There's always that question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just did, just to be certain.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
I saw Bambino at the drive, so it was like,
yeah, I
alright.
think he finished up with two drive-through penalties as well, because when he finished the race, he got like a 20-second penalty near the end, so
Yeah,
that's
but I think this,
unfortunate for him.
I think that one will be removed,
Yeah,
so
it's
he'll
assuming
be
that he reports
P4.
it to the steward, so hopefully he'll just be able to get a P4. But a big congrats to you, man. Good job on the win. You
Thank you.
managed to pull away from BR4 when he's not racing. That's the most important thing.
Yep. And I'm not here next week, so I
Oh,
don't know
okay.
if the race will go ahead then, but that's out of my, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. Right, well,
Mm.
I'll bring my attention to Jaguar. Congratulations on P2, man. How do you feel?
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
So talk me through your race. Obviously, I didn't see you fighting towards the front of the pack for most of the entire race. So coming in P2 near the end, that must have been a great feeling for you, huh?
Well, kind of. I was a bit lucky. A couple of accidents ahead of me, I think,
Yeah.
and I had yeah, an accident with Millsy as well. I'm not sure what he was doing.
No,
Going
my
into the last chicane, I'm sure he'll tell me.
yeah.
But it's a bit bittersweet, really.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that as well. I saw you guys were bumping wheels for a considerable part of that race. So was that frustration that took over when you guys were making that
No,
final
not
overtake or
not at all.
anything?
No, no. I wasn't getting frustrated at all.
Right.
I was just biding my time. I thought he was miles from me, and then he must have had an accident because suddenly he was right in front of me, and he had more penalties than me.
Right.
Uh, so I was just going to play it cool behind him, and then I think he either tried to let me through, and then that sort of that didn't work for whatever reason. And
Right.
then following lap, I think he had more ERS, and he was trying to defend, and then he kind of let me through again. I'm really not sure what he was doing. It
Mhm.
confused me anyway, whatever it was.
Right. Well, regardless, it can't take away from, obviously we'll deal with stewards and whatnot when those reports come
Yeah.
in, if there's reports. But regardless, a big congratulations to you for finishing in P2, man. That's
Cheers, man.
your
Thank you.
highest finish in Tier 1, right?
Yeah, again with penalties, it probably equals my best.
No, man.
Yeah, I'm
gotta
just
keep,
there to pick up the pieces.
gotta keep the optimism up now. But a big congratulations to
Yeah,
you, bro.
cheers,
I'll
man.
bring my
Thank you.
attention to you, Pyro. Podium in Tier 1, mate. Congratulations. How'd you pull this one out?
If I'm honest with you, I have no clue. That might be the worst race I've driven in a long time. Um, Basically, qualifying were pretty much my first laps. Had practiced a little bit on the wheel. Had to go to pad, kind of doing 13s. Didn't do too well in qualifying. I think it was like a 10-9 I got in the end, but then went to the race. Had an alright start, then got closed out on the outside by Stell, and I think there was someone on Stell's inside that nearly shoved me off track.
Mhm.
After that point, it was just a case of I knew people were going to spin. I didn't know who it was, but it was
Yeah.
about keeping it on track. It's always the case in Canada. I did that well. If you take away penalties,
No, I
11
mean,
seconds
but
at one point.
with a track like Canada, I guess you always have to take away penalties, considering this game is scuffed, and Canada specifically is like the most cursed track on this game, at least in my opinion. But nah, man, you drove a fantastic race. You were about to finish P2 there if it wasn't for that extra set of if it wasn't for that extra 3 seconds you got. But man, Pyro, when I saw you finish on the podium, I was like, okay, I gotta have interviews specifically to speak to him, because what an achievement this is, bro.
It had to be done. It had to be done. I messaged my girlfriend before this. Was like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'll get P7 and I'll move on, because that's just what it is at this point. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'll turn up, take my P7, move on, and I'll probably end 7th in the championship, because, of course.
Right.
But yeah, no, the 6 seconds was just so dumb. I made the exact same mistake 5 laps in a row on the Wall of Champions to cut the second part. That was 5 of my 6 warnings. So
Skill issue.
still came out of the safety car though. I was 1.8 ahead of Jaguar. I was like, even in chat, I was like, okay, I'm 1.8 in front of Jaguar. I'm confident I am confident that I can break that gap, and then
Yeah, Jaguar massively closed the gap.
Yeah, I think
I
Jaguar
apologize, Jaguar.
decided that.
I had to root for Pyro. Even I was hoping he'd manage to pull away by past the 3 seconds. But I'm gonna be real with you. I was rooting for him, but regardless, I'm not complaining to have him on the podium. Regardless, but what does this mean, Pyro?
First
Is this?
to be on the podium?
Yeah, exactly. So Pyro, what does this
Tier 1,
mean?
absolutely.
What does this mean for you going forward? Last 3 races, are we expecting more podiums from you?
If this was a calendar where I actually knew the tracks and actually could do well, i.e. Portimao, Netherlands, the answer would be yes. But with the the calendar as it is, it's highly unlikely. I'm obviously not here next week.
Is anybody racing next week?
I don't think anyone's. I don't think anyone's here next week.
Do I have? Am I gonna have to hop in the car and race for you guys? What's happening?
If that makes the race happen, yes. Sure.
Oh no!
Jeddah is a track that I can't keep the car on track, so it's a case of hope, I guess, just pray that something happens. And Bahrain is a track that I like a lot, but
yeah,
I know a lot of people that like it. So
yeah. No, man. I mean,
it's unlikely.
Okay, well, 3 laps left to go. We have Suzuka after this, so obviously, you know, a very difficult track to race on for consecutive amounts of laps. So, who knows? Drivers may be spinning, assuming it happens to begin with. But
just to know.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
I have a very big feeling Tier 1, Tier 4 are gonna have a merger, and I'm gonna be part of the grid as well, because we still probably won't have enough drivers. No, but I'll let you guys go. You guys go and relax. I know how mentally straining and tiring racing at Canada can be for 35 laps. So a big congratulations to you guys on your podiums. And Pyro, I look forward to speaking to you in the post races again, man.
It might happen eventually.
No, it will happen, bro. Keep that optimism up. Keep that optimism up. Right, but I'll just let you guys go. All right, thank you guys so much. Take care, you guys.
In a bit.
Right, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning into Tier 1. This has been a race, to say the least. But yes, we head down to Suzuka next week, where I know a lot of the drivers are not going to be racing. So BR4 Mitchell managed to win the race and extends his lead by roughly 26 points, because I'm assuming he got fastest lap as well. But will BR4 be able to bounce back next race? If he is racing, we will see. Right, well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Take care, and I will see you all next week.